everybody. I was talking with my friend Pete, we were coming over here and I was like, I feel like I'm talking about like class of 2013, we made it! I'm gonna sit, because I'm not as dynamic standing up, I'll get really awkward and like not know what to do with my hands. Thank you so much for having me here, by the way, tonight. Okay, so, when I was 4 years old, Miss Barnett gave my kindergarten class two options. You could pick violin or cello, but you had to pick one, and you had to study it until you were 12. She was moving down the roll alphabetically, and sheer panic struck me when it got to the K's, because I hadn't really been paying attention, and all I knew was that everyone was picking violin because it was small and adorable, and we were all small and adorable. And I have a best friend that I've known since I was 4, and her last name is Kim. And right as I realized I was going to have to make what at the time seemed like a life-altering decision in T-minus 5 names, I heard her say she was going to play cello. And no matter what my mother tells you, I did not pick playing cello because I was an independent woman from the age of 4 and I knew exactly what I wanted since the day I was born. I wanted to play cello because Eugene Kim wanted to play cello, and that was reason enough for me. And I played all through my childhood, and I never really paused to learn how to play properly because I had terrible technique up until I was studying it really seriously at Performing Arts High School. And I played because it was my thing. It was, some kids had sports, and some kids had dance, and some kids had math and science and English, and I had music, I had cello. And I loved to sing, but it was a hobby at best, and one that I never thought I was very good at. And I remember getting a solo at the end of a song in choir in 6th grade, and I got to sing, "Do You Hear My Faint Ahoy?" at the end of the song. All by myself, and all of these other girls in the choir teacher would like cue all of these other girls going, "Ahoy," like echoing me behind. It was a progressive school, and I was so terrified that on the day of the performance, a faint ahoy it was, and it hardly came, it was a whisper, basically, and all of the other ahoys that were being cued after me sounded kind of like cannon booms comparatively to my solo. And then I was 14, and my older brother, who is the typical problem child, was in a motorcycle accident and ended up in a coma for a month. And I was taken out of school to go be with my family and to deal with the grief and the whole thing. And the headmistress of my boarding school announced to the entire assembly of the school that what had happened to my family. She asked everyone to pray for us, which was very sweet and very nice. And of course it was a wonderful thing for her to do, but in a small community when tragedy hits, it's all anybody wants to talk about. And with only 300 kids in my entire school, grades 7 through 12, I was simply the talk of the town, and everybody wanted to be my friend so they could comment on how they thought I was coping. And I wasn't coping, I was numb. And I remember seeing my brother for the first time in the hospital, and I couldn't really process what I was looking at. Here he was, the 12-year-old who broke his arm in 3 places when he was skateboarding, or the 16-year-old I caught looking at porn, or the 18-year-old who had shot the winning 3-pointer in the championship game, and now he was the 23-year-old who couldn't breathe on his own. And my parents were both absolute wrecks, which is, of course, what they're supposed to do, and everyone kept on saying, "You have to be strong for them." And I was 14, and I felt the opposite of strong. I was the literal physical embodiment of my weak, "Do you hear my faint ahoy?" And when I didn't know what else to do, I wrote. I sat down at a piano and wrote my first song ever. It was awful, awful song in retrospect, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had never written any piece of music before. Well, I knew that I was feeling so much, and I didn't know what to do with any of it. So that became the process. People always ask me that question, what's your process? And I think what they really want to know is, do lyrics or music come first? How do you write the words that you write? And that's not really how I kind of quantify process. For me, process is living in a perpetual state of overwhelm and trying to cope. And also, my brother is alive and well and living in Sydney, and my story is not that tragic, I promise. I think it's really amazing. I actually didn't know that tonight was called Tell Your Stories, and I think it's really amazing because I think we are all, in some way, storytellers. And each day we make choices and decisions about how we want our lives to be. Whether it's, I think I'll have the salmon, or I'm going to be compassionate and present today. We write our own stories and choose how we want to share them with the world, and for me, I couldn't tell my story through cello. Once I figured out that I was A, not as good at cello as Yo-Yo Ma, and B, getting pretty good at this whole singer-songwriter thing, I made a choice. I decided to discontinue studying and pursuing cello professionally and start telling my story in the most honest way that I knew how, which was through singing and songwriting. And I remember the first time I heard Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell. So I know you like that song, Joe. I listened to the song the whole way through once, and then I immediately started it again, in disbelief and total awe that anybody could have written a song that literally felt like she was writing about my soul. And I wanted to burst into tears and sob, Joni, no one understands me like you do. In the third verse, I think, of the song, she says, tears and fears and feeling proud, to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds, I've looked at life that way. Cool, Joni. And she wanted to be a painter. So, she wrote songs that made people laugh and cry and dance, and she told stories, and they were believable and relatable, and they were my stories too. And I know the title of my speech tonight was How I Lost My Cello and Found My Voice. But I never really lost my cello. I still play all the time, and the best part is I get to play for me, not because anybody's told me to or because I have to, because I love it. And loss for me has been the most powerful motivator. My mother always uses the word grief when she's describing this acute sadness that is more visceral than explainable. And growing up, I always thought that she was just being dramatic. And I think now that I've kind of learned a few things along the way, and I've learned that I'm feeling sad today does not describe the consuming feeling that is grief. And I've learned that a heart is not something that can actually break. And I have learned that grief does pass, but it will be written into my story, as will joy and change and love. And that's what it's all about, right? When it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's love. And as I write and share my story, I would like to think that love will be what is remembered most. Thank you.